And welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Bretter.
And I'm John Jessup. Well, First Lady Melania Trump headlined a town hall meeting today at Liberty University. Its focus, the nation's opioid crisis.
Joined by key cabinet secretaries, the First Lady took questions from students about the epidemic that has destroyed more than 70,000 lives in just the last year alone. Amber Strong has the story.
Today's trip outside of the Beltway showed the First Lady's goal of taking the administration's fight against opioids away from the White House and directly to our nation's young people.
Rather than lecture you about the dangers of drug abuse, as most mothers would and should, I'm going to tell you what I have learned in this past year.
Mrs. Trump says she's learned the epidemic doesn't discriminate, taking a heavy toll on even the smallest victims.
I have visited several hospitals and facilities that are dedicated to helping all who have been affected by this disease, including people who are addicted, babies born addicted, and families coping with addiction of a loved one.
The First Lady also shared a tough but honest message with students.
The independence that comes with being a young adult can be exciting, but also overwhelming. No one here will want to admit it. I imagine some of you have or will be experiencing situations with drugs or alcohol.
Earlier this year, President Trump signed a bipartisan bill aimed at combating opioid addiction. That legislation includes penalties for manufacturers responsible for overprescribing painkillers while giving support to programs fighting substance abuse. But that battle goes beyond Washington. The First Lady says people everywhere must shake the stigma that goes along with drug addiction and get back to helping others.
You have a responsibility to yourself and also to those around you who may be struggling.
Event moderator Eric Bowling, who lost his son to a fentanyl overdose, says when it comes to support, the First Lady practices what she preaches.
I'm sitting with our family doctor there, and it was President Trump calling, and he was with Melania Trump, the First Lady, and he said, I can't imagine what you're going through, but whatever you need, we'll take care of it.
Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Amber. Well, joining us now is Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, the First Lady speaking there at Liberty University, one of many and the very latest examples of how the administration is reaching out to evangelicals.
Well, that's right. They've been doing this now really ever since he started in his administration. You know, Christian evangelicals for sure have been doing that, and it's been going on for a very long time, as we just talked about. Really, evangelicals, almost more than any other group, has this access. Now, evangelicals are working with a range of agencies within the administration on a whole host of issues. Christian leaders like Johnny Moore, Paula White, Robert Jeffress, just a few of the evangelicals working on criminal justice reform with insiders like Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, Javanka. Evangelical groups like the Family Research Council, they're working on religious liberty with the National Security Advisor and the Vice President's office. And then there's immigration, a coalition of Hispanic evangelical church groups, including leaders like Sammy Rodriguez, are working closely with those inside the West Wing. And then we move on to the life issue. The Faith and Freedom Coalition, that's Ralph Reed's group, and Concerned Women for America, they're just two of the Christian groups working with the Department of Health and Human Services. And then evangelicals like Jay Sekulow, the president's personal lawyer, oh, by the way, have provided the White House with key advice in placing top nominees on the nation's court. So all that is just really scratching the surface. And really, in the Trump administration, the Christian evangelicals hold this coin of the realm. You know, their connection to a higher power. I will credit Gabe LaMonica with that coin of the realm comment. I love that.
Well, David, you know, speaking of that connection, Paula White, the president's top faith advisor, she was here recently at CBN News, and she had posted this video of a room full of evangelical leaders worshiping at the White House and singing. And I asked her, I said, Paula, how often does something like this happen? Let's go ahead and roll that.
All the time. And that's what, Jenna, people get so surprised. Like, I'll never forget when we went into office and prayed over President Trump, and it went viral. And I'll say secular news media was like, what's going on? You know, what's happening? And what was happening is everyday normal. I mean, every time I see our president, I pray over him. He asks for prayer.
David, what's your take on that?
Yeah, He asked for prayer, for sure. Wrote a book about it, 282 pages, talking about how he asked for prayer. And Mike Pence, he talks to Mike Pence a lot, saying, hey, Mike, can you pray for me? And so, you know, as I talk about in the book, God can work with curiosity. And I think we've seen this in this White House. And a lot of people see the Twitter feed. I understand, and he's glad a lot of people see the Twitter feed, but what goes on behind the Twitter feed is a lot of what Paula just talked to you about, for sure.
David, it sounds like the president's agenda is very much in line with the values of many Christian evangelicals. For those who are keeping score, what are some of the big shared wins for evangelicals as well as for this White House?
Well, there are so many, John. I have three of them. Well, three.
Just three?
Well, there's so many. There's so many. Okay, let's start with Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. We'll put them in one, right? Supreme Court nominees. And then, of course, the embassy moved to Jerusalem. That's up there. And then the third one, it's not talked about as much, but it's a big deal. It was early on in the administration when basically President Trump signed a law that says that states now have the right to refuse Planned Parenthood funding, this Title X family planning funding. You know, under Obama, states would have to basically go ahead into that family planning and must use it for Planned Parenthood. Not under the Trump administration. Big deal.
On the life issue.
Yeah. David, this access that evangelicals have to the White House and to this president, you've been in Washington a long time. Is this unprecedented? Have you ever seen anything quite like this?
Nothing like this, for sure. George W. Bush, you know, had evangelicals as it relates to a big voting bloc for them, but then he dropped a lot of those key evangelical issues when he started running for office, like the federal marriage amendment. I will say this: it does remind me a little bit of like with Ronald Reagan in 1980, because it was the moral majority that kind of brought Ronald Reagan into power, and I thought that really was probably somewhat of the best comparison you can make. And I remember at the time, Ronald Reagan talked about to the National Religious Broadcasters Association, he said, you can't embrace me, but I embrace you. And so I think that probably is the closest to it, but nothing like this.
David, you just mentioned a few of the issues that evangelicals are working on now with the White House. What else is going on in the West Wing, and who else are they working with?
Well, there's so much more, but you know, urban revitalization with Darrell Scott, kind of like those inner city communities. That's what we hear in air quotes, the inner city communities. What does that really mean? There's a lot more to unpack there, but there's going to be more coming with that. Urban revitalization, that'll be interesting to watch, to see what some of these African-American pastors do. And I got to tell you, when I'm over in the West Wing, at times, I see Darrell Scott and many of these other folks waiting in the lobby, waiting to go upstairs into the West Wing to talk about this, and it's consistent. So watch for that coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, I remember one source of mine said it's like a shuttle bus in and out of the White House. Evangelicals just constantly moving in and out.
That's right.
They're regulars. Thanks, David.
Well, the Trump administration is planning to extend deployment of U.S. troops at the border with Mexico. Pentagon officials are telling multiple news outlets the mission could last through January. Right now, it's supposed to end in mid-December. Meanwhile, the president has met with Republican leaders in hopes of settling on a spending plan that includes money for Trump's proposed border wall. The president wants $5 billion for the project. He's even threatening to let the looming government shutdown happen if he doesn't get that money. Democrats already contending the president won't get all $5 billion.
We are for strong border security. We've made numerous proposals. Number two, the $1.6 billion for border security negotiated by Democrats and Republicans is our position. We believe that is the right way to go. Third, if there's any shutdown, it's on President Trump's back.
The government faces that potential shutdown come December 7th if that funding deal isn't reached.
Family Research Council, and he joins us now for more. Tony, thanks for being here.
Great to be with you all.
Tony, this issue of immigration has been a hot button issue for quite some time. The president, of course, likes to talk about it, likes to tweet about it. But in your own words, in your own mind, why is it so important?
I think the president is taking the right approach, and that is we must secure our borders. A nation without borders is not a nation. What's interesting, and I'm not unsympathetic to the folks coming from Central and South America, although there's others mixed in there that are from the Middle East and others. But look, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, those nations are rife with crime, with just disintegration of the family structure and everything. They're looking for hope. They're looking for help. They're coming to America. That's actually encouraging. But the problem is we're a rule of law nation, and what they're looking for will be lost if we don't uphold the rule of law. And I think the president is taking the right approach.
When it comes to the migrant caravan, and as Jenna just mentioned, the president tweeting, referring to them as stone cold criminals, and I think he was talking in part due to unlawful entry. How is that, though, helpful in trying to reach a solution? How is that helpful when it comes to trying to move the needle in immigration reform?
The president has limited ability in what he can do in terms of real solutions here. What he is doing is basically triage of trying to stop the influx of illegal immigration in the country. Congress is really responsible for coming together and coming up with a comprehensive immigration reform plan. I thought we were close, very close. But there are those who didn't want to deal with the border security issue. And then there were those who would deal with the border security issue but wouldn't do with the overall reform of what do we do with the 12+ million people who are here already illegally. Look, I think I just don't think it is reasonable to think that we're going to find 12 million people who are here illegally and send them out of the country. I think we have to secure the borders. We have to reform our immigration system. We have to deal with those who are here illegally in a fair way, but we also have to fix the other parts of our system that actually incentivize people coming here illegally.
Like you said, legislation is key. Tony, you know, as Christians, we're called to, of course, serve the least of these, but how do you balance that with the whole idea of law and order?
Jenna, that is a great question, because I've heard that so many times. People say, well, the scripture says that we're to love the alien, we're to love the foreigner. Yes, we are. But if you also read in the Old Testament passages, that is usually in close proximity to those same passages are instructions to the sojourner to adopt the customs. That's assimilation. And our system of assimilation is broken down, where people don't become Americans, that's what assimilation is. And that's what the Old Testament required, is they had to adopt the customs and become a part of the society of the children of Israel. But then the other aspect, there's one law for the foreigner and one law for the resident, for the children of Israel. So I think from a Christian standpoint, from a biblical standpoint, we have to approach both. Yes, compassionate, kind, caring, wanting people to come. That is what America has been and is, but also assimilation and rule of law.
Tony, you've been in Washington for many years. I'd love for you to describe or to rate what you feel of the dynamics of your influence and the access to Washington leaders now.
Most of the meetings, most of the interaction that I have is substantive policy engagements or interaction where we're working to move the policies of the United States more in line with conservative values, the Republican Party stated platform on many of these issues, but also in line with the values that many, many evangelicals across this country have.
Tony Perkins with the Family Research Council, thank you for your time and your perspective.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you all.
Well, new allegations against former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort throws uncertainty into the Russia probe. Today we learned Manafort's lawyer has been talking to Trump's legal team. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us from the North Lawn with the details. Ben?
Well, Jenna, Rudy Giuliani says that it's true. Attorney Kevin Downing has been filling them in on what his client has been telling investigators. Manafort made a plea deal to be a key source for independent counsel Bob Mueller, but now that's in jeopardy because Mueller says Manafort's been lying to the team. If that's the case, Manafort could spend much more time behind bars. And also today we have learned that President Trump
new revelations
has not ruled out the possibility of even pardoning Manafort.
These new revelations could put the former campaign chairman in hotter water or put him in a better position for a presidential pardon. Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani confirmed what Mueller alleges regarding Manafort's lawyers. They share with me the things that pertain to our part of the case. It's not illegal to share that information, and critics claim it's part of an effort to obtain a pardon.
I'm not aware of any conversations for anyone's pardon involving this process at all.
Prosecutors claim Manafort breached his plea deal by lying to them about meeting with Julian Assange of WikiLeaks. Mueller is focused on whether anyone close to the Trump campaign knew that WikiLeaks planned to release hacked material that could benefit his 2016 run for the White House. On Twitter, the president wrote, "At least 3 major players are intimating that the angry Mueller gang of Dems is viciously telling witnesses to lie about the facts, and they will get relief." All of this comes after the Trump legal team arranged for the commander-in-chief to answer written questions about alleged Russia collusion instead of a personal interview.
Certainly remain confident in the White House's assertion that the president was involved in no wrongdoing, was not part of any collusion.
Now, Manafort's team maintains their client believes he's provided truthful information. Manafort is in custody after admitting guilt last September. But for how long? Well, that all depends if he broke his plea deal, which offered him less prison time. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the White House.
Thanks, Ben. Well, in Mississippi, Republicans held on to a hard-fought Senate seat. Cindy Hyde-Smith won handily over her Democratic challenger, Mike Espy. Hyde-Smith's decisive margin of 8 points came even after she made some verbal gaffes that brought into play the state's history of racism. Though Espy faced some challenges of his own, dogged by past allegations of corruption.
Now that the Mississippi Senate seat has been filled, what majority do Republicans hold on to over Democrats in the Senate? For that, we turn to Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson. Abigail, what is the breakdown? How many seats do Republicans now have over Democrats?
Well, after the results of Mississippi came in, Republicans will officially go into next year with a 53-47 majority in the Senate. Now, this will come, that gives them a net pickup of 2 seats during the midterms. These 2 seats could be key for Majority Leader Mitch McConnell as the Senate continues to confirm presidential judicial nominees, as well as other important presidential appointments like a new attorney general.
Well, Abby, lawmakers are back in Washington for this lame duck session that lasts just a few short weeks. Still, they're trying to get a lot accomplished before leaving, so obviously keeping the government funded is a top priority. But you were able to speak with Senator Mike Lee from Utah about another goal for many senators.
Yes, Senator Mike Lee is one of the biggest advocates for this criminal justice reform, this bipartisan push to get a criminal justice reform bill passed. The House has already passed this bill, and now it's just up to the Senate and Leader McConnell to bring it to the Senate floor. The president has indicated that he will sign it, and Senator Lee says that in his 8 years as a U.S. Senator, they've never come closer to getting a bill like this passed. But he says that the time is now, and if they don't pass it now, that it might not ever get passed. Take a look at what he said.
If he were to make the unfortunate choice not to bring the bill to the floor this year, I believe it's dead. Not just for the end of the year, but really for the end of this president's term in office. That's unfortunate because it could pass, it should pass. I don't believe it will pass in the next Congress. With the incoming Democratic House of Representatives, they would demand something more exacting than what could pass in the Senate or could likely be signed into law by President Trump. So if we want to get criminal justice reform done, not only should we do it in time for it to be a Christmas gift to the American people, but we should do it before the clock runs out on this Congress.
Senator Lee says the 2 main things this bill will do is help prisoners, once they get out, acclimate to society, and it will also go after what he says are excessive mandatory minimums.
And Abigail, on the House side, today Democrats, they voted for their speaker.
Yes, well, today was just to vote to who they will nominate as their next speaker. Nancy Pelosi ran unopposed, but she won 203 to 32. And it is those 32 people who did not vote for her that could cause her trouble when the whole House votes for the next speaker on January 3rd. Now, so far, no other Democrat has stepped up and said they will run against her. And some of those that have opposed her say that there really is no other option, and they do believe she will be the next speaker. But she has until January 3rd to either convince some of those 32 people to vote for her or to at least convince them to vote present, because if some of those no votes vote present, then that would decrease the number of total votes she would need, and she would still get enough to win the speakership. But it is definitely not over for her.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
That's right. The saga continues. Abigail Robertson on Capitol Hill. Thanks, Abigail.
Yes.
Well, coming up, growth for the U.S. economy, but could it be slowing down?
Welcome back. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed up 600 points. That's the biggest jump in 8 months. It comes the same day as new figures show the American economy is still growing. The economy grew 3.5% in the third quarter. That growth a result of strong consumer spending and more business investment. The latest numbers from the Commerce Department follow an expansion of 4.2% in the second quarter. With 6 months of growth, the U.S. is on track to grow at its fastest pace in 13 years. Some economists are warning, though, growth will slow in the fourth quarter.
So are they right? Here now is Phil Kerpen, president of American Commitment. Phil, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Phil, what do you think? Do you expect growth to slow down in the fourth quarter?
Well, it would be pretty hard to keep it where it's been. We had a second quarter at 4.2%, third quarter 3.5%. That's been confirmed in the more the better estimate, the updated estimate that came out today was confirmed the 3.5% number. The consensus among the forecasters, both the private sector and the Federal Reserve forecasters, that the fourth quarter is supposed to slow to about 2.5% growth. But I think that part of that was the expectation that the Federal Reserve was going to be hitting the brakes pretty hard on the economy by raising interest rates. That now appears less likely with more sort of dovish remarks that we got from the Fed chair today. But of course, another part of it is also the trade outlook, which has been very uncertain with the president's tariffs and ongoing sort of escalating tensions with China. And so I do expect that growth is going to slow somewhat in the fourth quarter. It may not slow as much as the consensus estimate, down to 2.5%, but I think it's going to be lower than what we've seen in the past couple of quarters.
Yeah. President Trump, of course, he likes to tout the economy and talk about the numbers. But this new news about GM closing factories and cutting some, 10 to 15,000 jobs, of course, it's not good news. What are your thoughts on that, Phil?
Well, I think there are a couple things. I think the GM was one of the last of the major auto players to restructure coming out of the recession that we had some 10 years ago. Because they were so heavily bailed out by taxpayers, they were able to keep a lot of facilities in production that really weren't economically competitive, and to keep a lot of sort of middle and upper management that a lot of the other companies shed. And they went to a leaner organizational structure, and GM was sort of delayed this reckoning for a long time because they were able to get all of that taxpayer largesse. And so some of this is just necessary as a matter of rationalizing their operations and being leaner and more competitive in that industry. But I think another big part of it is that they've been hit pretty hard by the president's tariffs on steel and aluminum, and they're going to be hit very, very hard on auto tariffs if, in fact, the president goes final on those. And of course, the administration will say that all of these tariff policies are part of a negotiating strategy to get better deals with other countries, and in particular to get better deals with China. And the president's going to be negotiating with China next week at the G20. And I do think that as much as we're feeling some economic pain in sectors like the auto sector as a consequence of the tariffs, they're hurting China a lot more than they're hurting us. And we do have an awful lot of leverage right now to get a better deal and to sort of call off the tariffs, which I think would be a very big positive, both for the stock market and for the economy if they're able to do that. But as of right now, the trade policy is a major drag, and I think that's probably been one of the factors that's hurting GM, especially with the possibility that auto tariffs are going to be put in place on top of the steel and aluminum tariffs that are already hitting the auto industry.
Phil Kerpen, always good to see you. Thank you so much.
All right, my pleasure. Have a good one.
Still ahead on Faith Nation, we'll show you which parts of the country are being plagued with winter weather.
Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears.
Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless
Israel, that it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com to get your copy today.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
Well, it's technically not winter until December 21st, but John, parts of America, they didn't get that memo.
They sure didn't, because winter weather is moving in strong in parts of the nation. Lake effect snow from the Great Lakes is falling east of Buffalo, New York, into parts of northwestern Pennsylvania, and up to a foot of snow is being seen in some areas today alone. Buffalo may get as much as 20 inches of snow, Jenna, from the system. One index says this is one of the coldest and snowiest starts to winter the Northeast has seen in years.
We have our floor director, Laura, who is from that part of the country, and when you read that, she just sort of gave a
Oh, she's like,
cold
home.
shiver.
I can't wait to get back.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great evening.